When you think of a serial killer, what comes to mind? Do you think about someone wearing a mask lurking in the shadows? Or a crazed lunatic escaped from an asylum? We've all seen movies that well portray the typical serial killer. But what most of us don't think of is the next door neighbor or the average Joe at work. Serial killers live among us, sometimes for years, without any indicator of their insidious agenda. They don't look or act any different than you or me. After thoroughly researching the topic, I found that there have been several serial killers who become notorious through their acts of murder. The purpose of my speech is to inform you about three of the most infamous American serial killers. The three that I've chosen, due to their crimes and the publicity that surrounded them, include Dennis Rader, David Berkowitz, and Jeffrey Dahmer. Dennis Rader lived in Wichita, Kansas throughout his life, and it is where he committed his string of murders. He became known as the BTK killer, BTK standing for bind, torture, kill. Rader would choose a victim, stalk them, and stake out their homes. Between 1974 and 1991, Dennis Rader murdered 10 victims. For the most part, he strangled and suffocated them, most of his victims being lone women. 14 years after his last murder, Dennis Rader was arrested on February 25, 2005. He was charged with 10 counts of murder, in which he pled guilty to all counts. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms, which would require him to serve a minimum of 175 years without a chance of parole. Rader has been incarcerated in El Dorado Correctional Facility since August 19, 2005. David Berkowitz was born and raised in New York City. Over a year, Berkowitz would terrorize the city with a series of murders he committed. He was known as Son of Sam, or the .44 caliber killer. Berkowitz would prowl the streets at night looking for his victims, either sitting in a car or walking the streets. He used a .44 caliber gun to shoot his victims. Berkowitz killed 6 and wounded 7 victims between July 1976 and August 1977. He was arrested August 10, 1977, in which he fully admitted to the murders. He pled guilty to 6 counts of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 25 years in prison for each murder. Berkowitz remains incarcerated today in Sullivan Correctional Facility in Fallsburg, New York. Jeffrey Dahmer lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin during his life. Being named the Milwaukee Cannibal and the Milwaukee Monster, Dahmer committed his heinous acts in his hometown. He would lure his victims, young men, to his home to drink or to engage in sexual activity. He would drug his victims and then suffocate them. Jeffrey Dahmer killed 17 men between 1978 and 1991. He was arrested July 22, 1991, after what would have been his 18th victim escaped and notified the police. Jeffrey Dahmer was charged with 17 counts of murder, in which he pled not guilty by reason of insanity. He was found guilty in all 17 charges. He was sentenced to 15 life terms, which equal to 957 years in prison. He was serving his sentence at Columbia Correctional Institution in Wisconsin until the time of his murder. Jeffrey Dahmer was bludgeoned to death by another inmate on November 28, 1994. In summary, I have informed you about 3 of the most notorious American serial killers, which include Dennis Rader, David Berkowitz, and Jeffrey Dahmer. I thoroughly researched these 3 serial killers to put together the information I have presented to you. These men look like everyday people, not like the mass murderers portrayed in movies. So next time you think about a serial killer, what will you picture now?